Hey, I'm Abby. I'm a junior at Carolina, and I major in political science with concentration in Latin America. And today, for my midterm oral report, I watched the movie Embrace of the Serpent, and so I put a little slideshow together for that. So first, I wanted to give the context. This movie is inspired by two travel diaries of some scientists, specifically botanists, exploring the Amazon looking for this sacred Yacuna plant. And so the first scientist is Theo. He's German, and he traveled and went on his little expedition in the early 1900s. And so then 40 years later, we have the diary of our second scientist, Evan, and he's an American, and he goes down looking for the same thing, and he had extensively read Theo's diaries, so they're still in search of this Yacuna plant. And then what we read a few months ago in class was the article written by Hart introducing us to this Latin American film and its history, and I think what we can see is that over the years, Latin American histories gained popularity. And so in 2015, Chiro Guerra directed this film. It was his third film, Embrace of the Serpent. And it is a Latin American film. It's spoken in Spanish with some indigenous language as well. And so just like a quick plot of this movie is Guerra wants to depict the destruction of the Amazon and its people through this black and white film, and the film has the two parallel stories of the two scientists side by side looking for this Yacuna plant. So it flips back and forth between the two narratives, the two stories of these men who are both led by a shaman named Karamakate down the Amazon by canoe along this river, and stopping along the river bend and river basins. So obviously we know that most Latin American films have an underlying political message in them, this one to be included. So first we see the abuses by these rubber barons, and so with the economic rubber boom in the Amazonian forest, this led to torture, death, and the displacement of thousands of indigenous people. And so I think one scene that really stood out to me of the rubber barons and their abuses was one of these indigenous men speaking in his native tongue to Manduka, who was another indigenous man that went on this voyage with Karamakate and all them, and he was just like, he had one arm and no eye. He had been so beaten. He was trying to collect rubber out of these trees, and he was just screaming in his native tongue to just kill him. He would have rather been dead than being a slave to these rubber barons. And so a quote that I think really stood out and gave the political message is Karamakate. He said in his tongue, "If those rubber barons are men, I am a snake." You know, like, we talk about how, or I don't know, these men thought the indigenous people were uncivilized, but if civilization is this, then, you know, there's some differences, there's something wrong. And so then we also see with identity politics that these indigenous people obviously organize with their own people, their own tribes, their own native tongue. But as this culture becomes whitewashed, the indigenous people begin to respect like white priests and politically organize with those men rather than their own. And we see this throughout the film as white priests set up camp and these sadistic missionaries along the Amazon forest and river. And so this also plays into assimilation of these indigenous cultures. And we see multiple scenes of indigenous children at these missionaries speaking only Spanish, not their indigenous tongue. They have white haircuts, they don't have paint or feathers on them, they are wearing what Europeans would wear at the time, and they are practicing Christianity, which is not their native religion. And so these colonizers assimilated the indigenous cultures through these mission camps that they set up. And the little boys in the camp were actually stolen from their tribes, and they tried to ration that they were saving them from the robber barons, but it's, you pick your worst. You either choose to be a slave to the robber barons, or you choose to be, a slave to these priests in these mission camps. And so that brings us to the idea of colonialism. And so the two parallels of the film show how little has changed over these 40 years, because it constantly flips back and forth. It's the same narrative, it's the same thing, it's the same camps, it's still going on. 40 years later in the Amazon, as these white men continue to set up these missionaries and uphold their values, where they're still stealing, these members of tribes and wiping out the tribe and their culture by assimilating them through colonialism. And then the film also shows these tortures and dangers of these robber barons who enslaved them to collect rubber, like I was talking about earlier. And so there is symbolism throughout this film. So we see the serpent, as in the title, and this could mean multiple things. It could mean the winding Amazonian river. It does look like a long serpent, and this river is essential to Amazonian life. It's how they travel, it's how they get their food, their water through this river. So maybe it can mean that. We also see that these, through white colonialism, they've exploited the resources of the river and it's on the river basin. So maybe that all ties in together. And another thing I thought was interesting is this movie was filmed in 2015, but it's filmed in black and white, and I think that's on purpose. I think first it doesn't want to totally reveal all the Amazon has to offer, because it's not our home, and it holds a lot of depth and secrets, and so we just see the surface of that through black and white. I think another thing that Guerra was trying to do is reinforce the idea of whitewashing and colonialism in the Amazon, so he can do this through that black and white contrast. And then I think at the end we see after Evan drinks the tea of the Yacuna, he sees in true color. It's almost like a psychedelic scene, but it's the only scene that we have in color of this movie. And so I think another thing Guerra was trying to depict was we see truest when we drink this Yacuna plant. That's what he believed in his indigenous culture. And so then another symbol is the Yacuna. It's the sacred plant of Karmakate's tribe, and it grows at the base of these rubber trees. And I thought that was really interesting because this is their sacred plant, but his tribe is nearly as extinct due to these rubber barons torturing and displacing these Native people. Okay, some critics and awards. This film won an award the first time it was premiered in 2015 at the Cannes Film Festival, and it won the Art Cinema Award. And then, so we have the New York Times saying that this piece was beautiful. He said beautiful isn't a strong enough word to describe its scenes when talking about this film. That was Stephen at New York Times. And then Stephanie Murray with the Washington Post describes the film as completely transporting her and going beyond just a moral story being told. And so there are many reviews on this movie. I just wanted to feature 2 of them. And then so if you do want to watch this film, I highly recommend it. If you have Amazon Prime, you can watch it there on Prime Video. And then another interesting thing is the director of this film actually just signed with Netflix to do a documentary series in Colombia. The series hasn't been titled yet, but we'll be looking for that on Netflix. So thank you.